Yo, what's up guys? Rich from Touch Loops here, and today we're going to look at how to make your in-the-box synths have more character, more width, and a little bit more vibe. We've titled this How to Make Them Sound More Analog, because that seems to be something that a lot of people can achieve, but it's not necessarily about whether they sound like they've come from a piece of hardware or not. It's more about the characters that those synths bring. Now, we know those old synths had attitude, they had width, they had style, and they also had lots of like strange movement and weird artifacts to them. And that's something that we can recreate in the box. So what we're going to do is we're going to go from this starting point. And we're going to try and end up here. Cool. So this is being done in Ableton Live, but you could probably do this in any DAW. I just think it's a nice synth and it's really easy to explain what I'm doing and kind of show you the things that I'm doing. So we're starting in an analog, nice and simple. 2 sawtooths, these are our oscillator sections, as you can see. Then we're going into a filter, which is just a low pass, and it's going from one to another, and then it goes into the amp section. So straight away, what we've done is we've dropped an oscillator down by an octave, just so we can start to spread them out a little bit. We're going to pan these as well. So feel free to screenshot this or copy as you go along, whatever you feel is appropriate to you. And then we're going to add a little bit of noise, which is brought up here. A lot of these old synths kind of had like these characteristics of like hiss, just from going through all preamps and going through all compressors. It just had that feel to it, and you do potentially get a buildup of noise. And it's something to add some nice character to it. It's worth saying that I've chosen sawtooths just because they're really harmonically rich waveforms. They give us loads to play with, and they've got tons of character, and they actually work really nicely against each other. So the next thing we're going to do is going to detune the oscillators. So we're going to have one at plus 15, one at minus 15, and that's going to start to give us some cool beating effect of the oscillators as they move against each other. So now we can listen to it. Okay, already starting to sound a little better. What we can do is we can do a little bit of pitch movement. So if you're interested in that kind of like James Blake-esque retrograde sound with the diving chords, this is what you want to be reaching for. As you can hear, the note starts a little bit sharp and then it falls back down, and it's doing that across all the chords. So it's obviously polyphonic. So that's great. We can then move on to our filter section, because at the moment it's not doing a great deal. So let's have a look what we've got. This is our filter envelope for filter 1. This is the shape that it's going to follow if we tell the synth to follow it. So what we do is we turn our filter down a little bit, and then we tell it to start following. So use the envelope to velocity. So that's exactly what we want. Oscillator filter 2, sorry. We can do the same kind of thing. So we're starting to make some quite nice progress here. Maybe brighten them a touch. So we can hear the filter opening. We can hear that pitch modulation. We're starting to get some vibe into these. Let's look at our amp. At the moment, a little bit aggressive on the attack. So I'm going to lengthen that a tiny bit on both of these because I want it to be a little smoother on the way in. Cool. Tiny bit of release. And then we can start to go into the effects section that is within analog. So vibrato, let's add a little bit. As you can hear, the vibrato is affecting velocity and also pitch. So we're starting to get some up and down movement, which is cool. Unison, let's add some of this. again, it's starting to move around, starting to bend, it's starting to sound vibey. And then a tiny bit of legato, which is the slide, which will work beautifully with our pitch. Okay, sounding great. Now, onto the effects. So what I've got here is, I wanted to get a little bit of movement going. So I thought I'd reach for the chorus, but instead of it just being static and providing width, I'm going to use this LFO to modulate the wet dry. So with the chorus just on. Straight away, that's sounding good. It's giving us some width. It's sounding a lot cooler than it was. But what I've done is I've assigned this LFO to modulate the wet dry. So as it's playing, basically, we're going to be getting a little bit more, a little bit less, a little bit more over time, just to kind of give us a little bit more movement and add some extra vibe. So you could easily do this inside your DAW. You just need to use automation mode and then obviously automate the wet dry. What's really nice about this LFO is it's able to do the work for us and keeps it consistent throughout the session. So next thing we go to is this little cheeky free guy called Vinyl. So this is from iZotope. It costs £0, so it's worth grabbing. And it gives us some kind of like tonal shaping character, just to give a little bit more vibe to it. So at the moment, it's set on 2000s. So it's replicating a contemporary record. So it's going to sound pretty good. Just rolls off a little bit of the top end and we can start to get some warp in there. Again, it's pitch modulation and warble is what we want. If you were trying to look for an effect, could go 30s, so we're going to obviously highly filter this. So if you're making lo-fi or you want to do a cool transition in hip-hop maybe, you could easily switch between those two things. And then obviously when it drops, you bring in all the frequencies, which would sound cool. Next, I'm reaching for a tape machine. Good old-fashioned slate. Does exactly what I want. A little bit of saturation. I've spoke about it in numerous videos. It's got that low-end bump and it just kind of like glues it all together. It gives it a little bit of character and a little bit of hiss. Next up, a bit warmer, such a classic go-to saturation plugin that's inside Ableton. Could do this with anything, but this just happened to be close to hand. Push it. Just gives it a little bit of grit and attitude, and then I've obviously pulled the dry wet back. Last up, SuperVHS, which is something I really like by Baby Audio. Again, it's got a mix dial on it, so we can add these slowly. We've got Heat, which is basically distortion, Wash, which is more of a reverb, kind of a spectral number, and then Drift, which emulates the kind of warping effect of old tape machines, so wow and flutter, basically. And then there's this button called Magic in the middle, which I have no idea what it's doing, but I love it. Feels like it's making things a little bit more 3D, adding a little bit of reverb, potentially a little bit of all of them. And then last in my chain, just to tidy things up, I've got an EQ, taking out those low mids because they were starting to get a little bit muddy, and then boosting some top end. So without and with. Just a little bit of gentle shaping. And then to finish it off, what I've got is I've basically loaded exactly the same chord progression into a sampler. And then I've taken this hiss recording, which I believe's from Freesound or somewhere like that. And it's just basically running in correlation with my sound. So if you can hear it. We've got some filter modulation, so it's kind of like following the envelope that's provided. It just means we've got some more character. So with and without. Nice and subtle, but kind of gives you that vibe. So yeah, there it is. If this makes sense or you've got any questions, let me know. I'll be happy to show you this on different synths or in different DAWs, but these principles can easily be applied to any DAW. So yeah, thanks guys.